So, believe it or not, this is the first time that I've actually seen a Francis Ford Coppola movie on the big screen. Yes, I know he's made a ton of iconic movies in his career: The Godfather, The Conversation, Apocalypse Now, Dracula. The man knows how to make a very well crafted movie, a movie that does stand the test of time. And he's not one of my favorite filmmakers by any means, but he's one of those filmmakers that's like, oh, I kind of see, like, the influence, and like kind of see like how he's influenced other filmmakers and such. And so going into this movie is like, okay, this is kind of like a big moment for me as a cinephile, going to see a Francis Ford Coppola movie on the big screen for a first time. It would be amazing if the movie wasn't Megalopolis. This movie, this movie, you just when you think you can expect what this movie is like, trust me, you will not. You will not. So let's just dive right into it. So Megalopolis was a movie written and directed by Francis Ford Coppola. It has been a passion project of his for almost 50 years at this point. Stars a whole bunch of people, including Adam Driver, Giancarlo Esposito, Nathalie Emmanuel, Aubrey Plaza, Shia LaBeouf, John Voight, Dustin Hoffman, Jason Schwartzman, Talia Shire. Just a whole bunch of people appear in this movie. Lawrence Fishburne, I forgot about Lawrence Fishburne too. So many people appear in this movie, and the movie is about this man played by Adam Driver. He's an architect who created this device that basically this material that a society can be built on, and he wants to build New Rome, which is basically New York City, with this material and such, make this megalopolis, but he's at an opposing ends with Giancarlo Esposito's character, and that's part of the movie. That is definitely part of the movie. There's a lot that goes on in this movie. So I've been hearing about this movie for a while. This was a passion project of Francis Ford Coppola's for, again, almost 50 years. He's been trying to get this movie made for so long. He sold his winery. He did a lot of things during the production of this movie. Some things are controversial, which I don't know if I'm going to talk about that in depth or anything, but I kind of want to talk about it as a movie as a whole rather than talk about gossip and such. As a movie, wow, this movie is a lot. The best way to describe this movie is that it's either incredibly boring or incredibly insane, and there is no in between. Because there are moments where I'm watching this movie and I'm like, what is going on? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing, actors on screen? What are you doing, Francis Ford Coppola? What is going on? Now, I will be fair and talk about some things I do like. I do think there are some performances that are at least good, or at least some dynamics that are interesting. Adam Driver and Giancarlo Esposito, I like those two actors, so I was kind of curious to see what their dynamic was going to be like. It was very interesting to see their whole relationship kind of play out in this movie. Obviously, they're at very opposing ends throughout the entire movie, so it's definitely kind of interesting seeing these really two, I don't want to say titans, but like these two very gifted actors going back and forth with each other. Aubrey Plaza, I thought she did a really good job as well, despite some of the things her character says and does in this movie. I thought she was very interesting. John Voight also kind of surprised me a little bit in that sense that he's not embarrassing in this movie. Like, I thought he was incredibly embarrassing in Reagan. In this movie, he's not quite as embarrassing, again, despite some of the things he's forced to do. I do really like the production design in this movie. This is one of the most gorgeous movies I've seen. It's like the production values alone, from the cinematography to the actual set design and such. It is very well constructed, and definitely one of those movies where I can kind of understand, oh, this is why it took you so long to make this movie, because you wanted to make these designs look as detailed and such. Like, the attention to detail is very well done as well. Like, you can definitely tell at times, like, instead of like NYPD blue, for instance, it's NRPD. It's like, okay, so it's clearly not New York, it's New Rome. So it's like you kind of see that on like the police hats and such. It is kind of interesting. Like, if there's any reason to go back to watch this movie, it's mostly because of all the attention to detail that you may have missed the first time. So I think for that reason alone, it is kind of worth watching. Maybe worth watching again and again. But honestly, this movie, again, I'm going to reiterate this because this movie is either incredibly boring or incredibly insane. And there is hardly any moment in this movie where it isn't one of those things. Like, there are times where I'm watching this movie and I'm going, why? Why is anything in this movie happening this way? I don't understand why. And it's so boring. It's kind of slow at times. I kind of started nodding off a couple times, and I had like crap ton of caffeine on me at the time. So I was like, I should be staying awake, and yet this movie just isn't interesting except when it gets incredibly strange and just doesn't work for me. There are moments in this movie where it's just nuts. Like, okay, so there's a scene where Adam Driver's giving this Q&A, and for the majority of the movie, it's like in a full screen and such. So but then for this interview, it's like in a very small box. It's about the size of like this on an iPhone, basically. Why? Like, why? And looking into it, so apparently in New York and LA, they have these screenings where someone from the audience asks Adam Driver a question. What? Like, what is even happening? It's just kind of odd. Like, why do it this way? It doesn't really add much. It's just odd. It's just strange. And I would also say this movie is incredibly unfocused. There's a lot going on in this movie. Like, the main plot, again, is Adam Driver and Giancarlo Esposito kind of going back and forth. But there's some stuff with Nathalie Emmanuel and Adam Driver who I didn't really like them as a couple, if I'm being honest. They were just kind of generic to me. Her character could have been played by anyone and wouldn't have made much difference. Aubrey Plaza is given a lot to do in this movie, and her character just changes her tune every few minutes. It's like crazy to me. I'm like, what is even going on at this point? I'm just completely lost. It's like, even with nodding off, I feel like I kind of caught up with it. It's like, I don't think I missed much, but then again, there would have to be something to miss in order to miss something. This is a weird one. A lot of new plots in this movie just keep popping up, and a lot of stuff is very underdeveloped. Like, they kind of introduced some stuff with Adam Driver's wife, and that never really feels fully resolved. There's this whole idea that he can, like, freeze time and such, but they never really do anything interesting with that. There's all these plots involving Shia LaBeouf's character, Aubrey Plaza's character, and it doesn't really add to anything other than the insanity that is this movie. And there are times where I'm thinking, it's like, pick something and develop it. Pick an idea and develop it. Pick a storyline and let's see it all the way through. But no, Francis Ford Coppola doesn't want to do that. If this was like a massive, like, a trilogy of movies and such, maybe it could have been something. Like, imagine if The Godfather was like one movie and then try to cram all three movies into one. You would get Megalopolis, because it would just seem very messy. It would just feel incoherent. It would just feel very dull as opposed to what it actually is, which is none of those things. So this movie's wild. This movie is very wild. Yikes. And also, there's this whole thing that apparently Francis Ford Coppola tried to do. He tried to basically kind of comment on everything from, politics to social media to kind of like how he basically compared the fall of Rome to how he kind of sees America going these days. And again, I feel like there's so much kind of going on that none of it really feels fully developed. There's so much going on, like so many themes that are just not really there. It's like, it's a concept of an idea, but the ideas are never fully there. It's just, you're kind of saying something. It's like, imagine, if you will, like if you're writing a thesis paper and you just say the thesis and you don't really say much with it. This is a weird review. I feel like they're not really saying a whole lot. It's just, you have, like, you're kind of saying something, but you're not. You're saying, oh, social media is bad, and it's just bad. Or it's like, yeah, the division in politics is really bad, and yeah, it's just bad. What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? You would think that for a filmmaker as smart as Francis Ford Coppola would make a better movie than this. You would think that if you spend 50 years working on something, that it would be better than this. That you would actually have an idea of what you were trying to say, an idea of what you were trying to do, and yet this movie doesn't have any clue. And also, I found this movie to be unintentionally hilarious at times. Whether that was a creative choice, a line of dialogue that was said, whether it's like the actual line itself, like Aubrey Plaza has a line that was like, I can't believe you just said that. And Adam Driver has a few lines admittedly where it's like, I can't believe you said that in that tone. And I'm like, why? Like, what is happening at times? Yikes. And also, there are a lot of actors in this movie. So many iconic actors are in this movie, and a lot of them don't really get anything to do. Dustin Hoffman's in this movie for a few moments. Oh, Lawrence Fishburne is the butler to Adam Driver's character. He's the narrator as well, and his character doesn't have anything. It would have been more interesting if he was just the narrator. But there's a random moment in the movie where he's narrating after Adam Driver and Natalie Emmanuel leave the scene, and he's narrating in his head, but then all of a sudden he turns the camera and just says the end of the sentence. Again, nothing makes sense in this movie. Nothing at all. Other actors are kind of just wasted in this movie. Talia Shire is wasted. Jason Schwartzman's in it. Catherine Hunter's in it. Why? Why is anyone in this movie? It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I did not find this movie engaging. I did not find this movie interesting. I appreciate the ambition, but I feel like if you are going to do something as ambitious as this, you would at least try to make an effort to try to make it mean something, to make it feel like it's actually saying something, instead of this movie that is just this smorgasbord of ideas that is just boring or insane, and there's really nothing left for anyone who doesn't want something that's incredibly boring or incredibly insane. So I will say I feel like this movie is going to get a cult following in some way, whether that's now it's like people are going to watch it and go, oh, this movie is so bad it's got to be worth seeing at some point. And I feel like that could really happen right now. But I can also, if there's a cult following for this movie, 10 years from now, would I be surprised? No. But it's going to take a lot. Maybe it's like someone could like do a deep dive of this movie and just be like, okay, here's what you didn't understand. And maybe I could go back maybe 10 years from now and watch this movie again and think, maybe I misunderstood it at the time. And now I look at it as like, oh, maybe it's different. I don't know if I'm ever going to watch this movie again because it is just a strange, surreal, either unintentionally hilarious, absolutely crazy, or just absolutely boring movie to sit through. So, Megalopolis, even though the production design is very well done, and you can definitely appreciate a lot of the hard work that Francis Ford Coppola took into creating this world and such, and some of the actors admittedly do a really good job, I just found everything else to be kind of dull. A lot of the ideas are just not there. I mean, they're there, but they aren't fully developed enough to really care about them. Some of the actors are just incredibly wasted. Some of the actors are just are just kind of embarrassing themselves at this point. Like Shia LaBeouf and Jon Voight are just kind of doing some embarrassing things. There's a lot of moments where I was kind of laughing, but I felt bad about laughing because other people in the theater, and I feel bad, especially if I'm in a crowd of people and I'm like not enjoying something like this, and I kind of start laughing because I feel like what if they're enjoying it? And I've talked to a couple people who saw the movie various points, and I was like, one didn't like it, one actually really loved it, so I can definitely kind of see it. Again, I feel like it's trying a little too hard at times, but I feel like it didn't try hard enough in areas where it really needed to. So Megalopolis, yeah, Megaflopolis is more like it. It's a movie that it's pretty bad. It's incoherent. It's a mess. It's a movie that really shouldn't have been like this. If it was, hear me out. If it was like longer and it was like more of a TV show or a mini series or something, then maybe I could appreciate it a little bit more. But it just isn't. It's all this one big 2.5 hour movie that it goes everywhere, and yet it goes nowhere. It has ideas, it has all the ideas, and has no ideas. It's crazy. There could be a call following for this movie, but it's going to take a lot to make this worth watching. Because of the ambition, because of the effort, I won't say this is a skip it, but I will still give it a pretty low score of 1.5 out of 4 stars. Stream it. So, what's your favorite Francis Ford Coppola movie? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.